And welcome to this Peel Yourself Off the Mat Monday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest, joined as always on these Mondays by one of my favorites, and of course, an astute handicapper. He's not depressed that basketball and hockey are over because he likes to dive into Major League Baseball. And I just found out as we were coming on, this man is deeply involved in betting soccer, a game that he embraces in spite of the fact that here, I mean, you talk about contrasting views. I think it was a game that was invented by a mutant society that had no arms. And Mike loves it from his youth. In fact, incurred one of his more serious injuries of his recreational and competitive sporting lifetime by playing soccer, which would have been enough for me to shut the door in that game forever. But we welcome Mike to the program. Michael, how are you, my friend?
Great to be here with you. Big game. It's sad to see the game the way it turned out last night from the injury standpoint. But yeah, it was another game 7 in sports, which is probably the best, most exciting time of any sporting season is if you get a game 7 in either baseball, hockey, or basketball. And we got one last night.
Got one last night. Became very deflating as Halliburton had the injury. There was actually a forewarning from my talk about. I'm involved in the Alzheimer's Cup tennis match once a week with my buddy Dr. Jerry Perlmutter here in South Florida, and we're still playing. We're both in our we're both about the same age, going to be 74. So, look, the drop shot's very effective, but he was actually saying, as a podiatrist, before the Thursday game, that it was sketchy for Halliburton to go and attempt this with a calf strain like that because what muscle is immediately impacted if something goes wrong? The Achilles tendon, of course, very much attached to the calf muscle and responsible for the activity there. So he gets through the Thursday game, and it couldn't have worked out any better. He didn't even have to play the whole game, and you're thinking he's going to be in better shape coming up on Sunday night, and takes one bad step. Either he needs new sneakers or he needs somebody else to help him diagnose what his chances were of incurring a severe injury, because he goes down after being 3 for 4 from three-point land, and even with that, his one missed shot, he immediately recovered and made another one. So looked like he was in form to go ahead and have a big ball game. And you had to see, if you had Indiana plus 550, you had to see that money just sailing out the window, in one of those money bags with wings on it. But what were your thoughts on a season? And the other thing that's happening in sports, and I know you're a huge sports fan, this business of labeling a team a dynasty immediately, no team has repeated in the last 7 years in the NBA. There's a strong likelihood it won't happen again. I love what Oklahoma City did this year. They still were challenged to 7 games in the 4 series they played in the postseason, and yet everybody just wants to throw this dynasty word at them. Set up to maybe have some long-term success, but there's no guarantee of that. Is that now the most overused word in sport, or do we just have to adjust and have a new barometer for what a dynasty consists of?
Well, a dynasty to me was the Celtics of the 60s.
Yeah.
The team that gets there and wins all the time. Now it's like, you need things to talk about on these talk shows and people on podcasting like we do. We always need something to talk about. We could talk about burying our bookie and doing all that. But really the whole point of this is, what is it that, really constitutes a dynasty? To me, the Florida Panthers have a better chance of another appearance in the Stanley Cup Finals and a win. Would probably say, okay, we have a dynasty. The Belichick era, you had the 3 out of 4 Super Bowl wins that kind of everybody labeled that. The Chiefs, people think the Chiefs should be a dynasty, all that, but the word's overused. I agree with you 100%. I link a dynasty, I think, back to the Celtics of the 60s is the only one that I can remember.
Well, yeah, the Islanders winning 4 straight Stanley Cups. That certainly is qualifying as being dynastic. Montreal Canadiens used to win it every year, or so it seemed back in the old days of the 6-team and eventually the 12-team league. They were a dynasty. Packers under Lombardi certainly constituted a dynasty. The Wizards mentioned with UCLA, but this penchant for immediately wanting to declare a team as being a dynasty seems way out of bounds. And I go back to one of my favorite lines in any movie, which was Let It Ride with Richard Dreyfuss, where the tout comes over to Dreyfuss and his accomplice there at the track and says, everything you got on a 6. And as soon as he walks away after thanking the guy for the tip, he turns to his guy, Dreyfuss, and says, put a line through the 6.
Yeah.
You can pretty much do that after a team wins a championship. It's so rare to repeat anymore. So my inclination, and these teams are always immediately installed as the favorite for the upcoming season.
Right.
Wouldn't that be your first instinct, is to put a line through OKC?
Yeah, you would. And here's the reason: you got younger kids today seem to be distracted. You have what happened to Halliburton last night, the potential injury bug. Seems like more non-contact injuries in sports ever before. These players do not take time off. One of the big discussions that we had last night was, should Halliburton have played? Well, here's what you got. When did you get hurt? You have the chance of him getting more seriously injured, which happened, and against the image of what Indiana would have been if Halliburton was there. Now you lose, and you lose the player. So you get the double whammy anyway, which you would have had. Oh, they probably won't win, but they protect the player. Looked like the Warriors did it with Steph Curry, not taking the risk. Legs and ankles are the biggest part of what these guys do, and to me, the workouts that they do off season never stop. I go back to watching Kevin Durant on his HBO documentary after he lost his last game in the series against the Warriors when he got eliminated. The initial day, he wakes up, flies to LA, does his camp that he was doing, then shot with Steve Nash for 4 hours. The day after being eliminated from the playoffs, back in the 80s with the Giants, I mean, let's go back to the Yankees and baseball at that time. Players took months off. They rested after getting a season, a hard-fought season. Giants, we had nobody in the room and locker room forever. Maybe players need to take a break and let the body rest instead of constantly putting it through all this. And I think that's probably why you see these injuries happen, and they can derail a franchise. So a little bit off the path there, my thought, but one of the conversations was, should Halliburton have even attempted to play, knowing this was a possibility?
Well, there was reason to go ahead and insert him in there, because
Sure.
he had played in Game 6.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have to play the entire game because it was a blowout. He
Mm-hmm.
survived that, so you're thinking, all right, maybe he's going to be okay. Interestingly, though, the dynamic in the East now with Halliburton, I didn't see any official statement about the severity of the injury, but you're assuming he's probably going to be out for the season. If he did tear an Achilles, you already have Jason Tatum. And we should have also thrown the Yankees in, as you mentioned, as part of the
Right. Yeah.
World Dynasty teams. But and they were that in several over a long span of time in several
Sure.
different instances. But with those two guys out, I mean, Indiana compromised badly. Boston compromised badly. Arguably their best player on both teams' rosters out. You have the Knicks probably thinking that they're in there with an even bigger shot. And the
Sure.
Miami Heat had a chance to trade for Kevin Durant and offered literally, I don't know that you would characterize these guys as NBA bag ladies because they're young. So we don't know how far their career would go. Jaime Jaquez Jr. was very promising in his rookie season after playing 4 years at UCLA, but tailed off a little bit this year, was not the factor that he was a year ago, didn't progress off of that. And they were supposedly offering Nikola Jovic, who I've watched now for a couple of years. Everybody says this guy's going to be great. He should be on the all Elliot Ness untouchable team. I haven't really seen that level of play for him. We're still waiting for this guy to blossom. Haywood Highsmith, an interesting player, and the number 20 pick. But would they not have been? I mean, should they not? Had they known that this was going to happen, would they not have been more aggressive in trying to get Durant? Because now the East has been thrown pretty much wide open. Cleveland's still going to be a factor, you would have to think, but Mitchell is often injured, and we saw a couple of their other guys go down. Would you not think that Durant would have been an interesting dynamic for the Heat to throw together, and yet their offer was fairly pedestrian compared to what eventually was accrued back from the Houston Rockets?
Yeah, you wonder if really they might have offered something more, maybe a player that they thought would have value that didn't. I look at is the Tyler Hero factor has been in there. The Heat actually accomplished more in the bubble when Tyler Hero got hurt. They got to the finals, and I find him as a defensive liability watching him in the Cleveland series. So maybe that was a player that they wanted to throw in the deal, matching up closer salaries wise, giving it a little less, throwing Hero in, and Durant could pick up that offense, and yet maybe they weren't interested, so they had to come up with some other deal that looked worse to the public, but maybe the Heat were offering something. I saw Pat getting killed on X, and I feel bad for that because I'm a huge Riley fan. But they're saying that the offer was wasn't close to Houston's, and I agree. Houston's offer, I think Phoenix might have gotten the best end of the deal when you really look at it. You're getting guys who could fit in, do a little bit more than an aging player that probably doesn't get along with your front office. So I think both teams did pretty well in that deal. The
Oh,
deal
no
that came.
doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Look, Durant, the last two go rounds here, he goes to Brooklyn, and of course, look, you were involved with some head cases there with James Harden, especially Kyrie Irving at the
Mhm.
time, and the whole COVID thing. That bombs out, and they ended up decimating the franchise and setting them back light years for trying to assemble that particular configuration of big threes. Then he goes to Phoenix. He's teaming up with Devin Booker and a team that wasn't all that bad. They don't even make the postseason. So
Mhm.
you have to ask yourself, is it worth extending yourself and supposedly mortgaging whatever future you have with young players and draft picks to acquire this guy? Is he really going to put you over the top? Houston, many people forget what was the second best team in the West this year, where people thought there were many contenders in spite of OKC's dominant play during the regular season.
Yeah, you just look at it like I don't know if it would have been the right move bringing him in anyway. Um, I look at it, you don't trade for 37-year-old aging players, even though his numbers are great. I think watching this, digging into the officiating and how the game is refereed, probably makes Kevin Durant a better player today. The game is a much different game. It's more offensive minded. I go back to seeing Durant. I don't think he's been at the levels that he was with Golden State since he won titles and manufactured a title by himself to that franchise, which he already had won prior to that. So I think this is what comes down, and everybody wants a ring, and they figure a way to get to that point. I think in the Heat, what they've accomplished, I think they've overachieved. In other words, they've gotten to finals with teams that no one thought they would get to. So I think that was the attraction for Kevin Durant to come. A no state tax state, as well as the Heat culture and what the Heat have accomplished. And supposedly he had a great relationship with Eric Spoelstra through the Olympics and stuff. You know, I look at it like it would have been nice to have him there, but the price might have been too much if you look at it. And what are you going to get with a 37-year-old guy a couple of years out of it if it doesn't work? So we'll see what the Heat do now.
All right, you're diving into your soccer wagering, which I find, of
Yep.
course, surprising. You and I both have completely different viewpoints of the game, as I stated earlier. You, of
Mm-hmm.
course, enjoyed playing the game, and you say it was your best sport to play. And I know you're very athletic and very good, well versed in a lot of different games. But for me, soccer, when I was in junior high school and first played the game, it was strictly as punishment. I remember Coach Mike Mousehart was the guy's name, and he was a real tough guy. He was a shop teacher who coached football, and if he needed to find out who graffitied the men's room, the bathroom, then he would say, "Listen, we're going to play soccer until somebody rats the guy out." So it was strictly a form of punishment for me. But I don't know. You're punishing the bookmakers with your soccer plays. How are
Well,
you doing that, Mike Jones?
here's the thought about soccer. It's the number one bet sport in the world. We're new into this gambling, and now we have the biggest soccer event in the world coming to the United States in 2026.
Yeah.
We now have the club, the FIFA is only the second time they've ever done the FIFA Club World Cup, which is here now, which Messi and Inter Miami are playing in, which they got a late win the other night, which was a great, exciting game if you're a soccer player. The thought that I saw was I was in Vegas for the 2010 and 14 World Cups. And what I saw there was a vibe in the books early morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. People are still out coming in and betting it. The books were packed. Every country seemed to be represented. We're a melting pot here in Florida. If you go out to see Brazil play, sure, you go to a Brazilian bar, it's going to be jammed like it's a Super Bowl. The atmosphere, I think, for soccer will come even bigger when this World Cup comes. I think it's what the country and what the MLS does after that to see the interest in what happens. And I think you're going to see it bet a little bit more now. You have the CONCACAF, the U.S. World Cup team is playing, not with all their players, is playing now in the championship that comes every other year down here. I think it's gonna grow, Jeff. That's all I'm thinking is that soccer's going to come into this country better. And I think the more that you see with the product the NBA puts out and other sports, I heard a conversation on a video from a prominent gambler that we all know. I'm not going to name him, but we all know him. And he said if it wasn't for gambling, he said football and basketball would be out the window. And
Wow.
he said they're just looking at it like the gambling is keeping these sports this popular. The betting shows, all that. It's really helped give them a vibe. And you watched, unfortunately, what happened last night in Game 7 again. Only two teams have ever won on the road in Game 7, so you're kind of thought, hey, look, I mean, I'll give you two little betting aspects of the Game 7 last night. The minute Halliburton's laying on the ground, you go and look at it. I think at the time Indiana's up one or something when he got hurt. I don't know exactly the score, but it was around a tie game. And now all of a sudden you look live and it's lines 8.5. So if you have the 8 with Indiana, you get off right away. And then the total went from what was looking like a good line that was fed at 214, dropped immediately to 209.5. And if you bet under because of Halliburton's injury, you don't even get close to 209.5. So in the second half, actually went under 108, which would have been a 203 total. So to me, you could see the live betting angle right there. What happens as soon as the injury happens? You jumped on the other side and the under, and you made a good win if you were paying attention. And that's what gambling is doing to increase the sports odds. Increase what the interest in the game is.
I think overs were humongous on the success side in Game Sevens of NBA Finals over the last many years, and of course, a friend of mine texted me with caps now. So under looks like the total, and he happened to be correct on that. If you were playing
Yeah.
the total in that ball game, all right.
Yeah.
So where do we turn? You're okay with all of this because a lot of people are thinking, "Geez, what am I going to do until I start
Yeah,
betting
I mean,
in the NFL preseason?" But you're all right with all of this baseball.
yeah, you have a little soccer to pay attention to. TNT and it's got a couple of games on a day, and Fox and FS1 are doing the CONCACAF playoffs, so you got a little extra action. Being a soccer guy, playing it, not so much for gambling. Only got into that when I was living in Vegas and the World Cups. You get into it. I don't bet it every day. I don't watch the MLS to figure it out. I don't watch Premier. But in these big cup events, I think it gets, it's like the NFL playoffs, so you get more and more people coming out. But yeah, it's an interesting format to watch these club teams come all over. So I'll pay attention to that. And we still have baseball, and then in a slow time of year that we can go in and dabble with. Yesterday, if you bet against a sweep, you had a really good day. A lot of these teams, came out, and came up pretty good. If you were really looking at win totals in Chicago Cubs, all three games go over of totals of 9.5, 11.5, and 12.5. So you have a good day, a good week if you're liking home runs in baseball in Seattle and Chicago. The Dodgers come up with down 3-0 if you took them live in the fifth inning at plus 200. You made a nice wager yesterday and then the winning going away 13-7. So you got some angles in which to play on, and players can figure it out. And we're working on something right now, Jeff, and I'll bring it up to the viewers. Is when you're laying 2-1, Yankees were that yesterday. Dodgers were that. You wait for them to start losing. I mean, take them at a pick 'em, right? So you got the bet at 2-1 to start the game. You're hoping your team goes down, and then you got an even money bet. If you lose, you only lost even money instead of 2-1. If you win, you get the win anyway. And you see these teams coming back. The Pens are struggling. Might be a way of looking at this and say, all right, get a 2-1 favorite and lay it out there and don't bet it. It happens. And see what happens. If you did it yesterday, waited for the Colorado game, right? You're losing. You're up 2-0. You wait. You don't do anything, and then they're down. You can come back and bet them. You would lose, but Colorado took a lead but avoided a sweep. So a lot of these different ways to go ahead and look at this, and when you're digging hard into it, so that's what I'm kind of looking at.
A lot of different angles, no doubt. Just a side note: Messi, of course, now lives here in South Florida, playing for the Miami MLS team. And I believe he may have a home in the complex just south of me here, Sea Ranch Lakes. I'm not sure.
He does.
But that wall is a huge division. You would think that people would be just waiting outside there, for Messi's presence. And yet, as popular as the game is, and here is arguably, at least among the top 10 of the world's most popular athletes, even at this stage, this guy goes unencumbered into places. He happens to be a fan of a little sandwich shop that I do some business with, and he comes in there all the time, and nobody even knows who the hell he is. He's able to travel without, as I said, without having to worry about having bodyguards and all kinds of crazy stuff. So, as much as the game has its popularity here, it's odd to think that the game's biggest star can just roam around and go pick up a cheesesteak, and nobody even bothers to say, "Hey, how about an autograph or something like that?" I wanted to get into one golf thing because I know a lot of people have been wondering. You always ask yourself, is Tommy Fleetwood ever won a PGA tournament. He's usually prominent in these majors. I don't mind playing him in pools. I don't expect him to win, so I'm unlikely to bet him straight up to win anything. And he's got a couple of stroke advantage going into the final round of the Travelers, and then he's up on Keegan Bradley, 3 shots with 4 holes to play, ends up losing and running second. As he 3 putts 18, and Bradley holds a birdie putt from pretty much the same spot that I believe Fleetwood missed his par putt that would have put him at least in a playoff. What did you make of that? I mean, is this guy somebody that had to be a crushing defeat for this guy
Yeah.
who may go his whole career without ever winning a PGA event, as prominent of a golfer and as frequently mentioned as he is?
Yeah, and you saw that happening early on. He three putted a couple times in the early part of the round, and I think once you start feeling that pressure early on, missing a short putt, I think those are the putts these guys make 90% of the time. And if you start going at 75 or 70%, this is what happens when you lose tournaments. Interesting part of Keegan Bradley, who's going to be the Ryder Cup captain, is now does he get his spot in the Ryder Cup? Like, is he going to be a player's captain, which is a rarity if it's ever. I'm not sure if it's ever happened before. So you have all this to happen now, which is, I guess, is very interesting. But yeah, I mean, again, pressure of today's athlete is different than it was years ago. We just didn't have all the distraction. I mean, I go back again. I can't emphasize enough when I'm at Giants. You didn't have the newspaper sitting on the chair. Parcells did not want the newspaper writing about our team that was getting hammered in the press on your chair. But now everybody's got their news on this. We're all sitting here with a phone, and now all these players read everything. And you wonder, just, Fleetwood applying pressure on himself to win. It's not the money. The guys all have money, lifelong money, where in the years when we're talking about, the money was the big deal. You had to survive, so you avoided the pressure to pay for your family. Now it becomes all the ego thing. Now it becomes, can the player do this? It'll be something good to watch moving forward. Does Fleetwood get in a chance to do it again and have the problem? So I wouldn't call it a Van de Velde type choke, but can't thrip that last green.
Yeah, middle rounds too, second and third round. I mean, the second round he had 2 eagles.
Mm-hmm.
And he had another eagle on one of the holes, one of the par fives that he had previously eagled in the second round. In the third round, the guy was playing great. And yet I can hear my friends screaming, "I wouldn't bet Tommy Fleetwood with your money. This guy sucks."
Yeah.
And he managed to, and it was sad too, because he seems like a really decent guy. But wow.
Yeah, you're right. And the other thing too is, I'm a strong proponent of not looking at the scoreboard.
Yeah.
You're playing the golf course, not your opponent. The only time you really need to is if your caddy looks up and says, "You got a 2-shot lead here on 18. A bogey's not a bad score. Don't get over aggressive." Other than that, I wouldn't be looking at the board. I know it's hard not to because their screens are everywhere, but I would just be doing my thing. And when it all ends up, it ends up. I mean, I can remember trying to qualify for the senior am in Florida, and getting to 18, knowing my score, I was 6 over, and I said, I need a birdie here. Got aggressive, put it in the water, almost holed out for bogey, made double bogey, and get in there. Said, well, I had a chance. I look, and 1 shot in would have given me an alternate position.
Wow.
So if I didn't double, if I made par and played it conservative, I would have probably been in the list, and then now I didn't. So yeah, I made the mistake by not knowing the scoreboard, but I was like, let me just go and play the game I play and do what I do. And I would think that'd be more. Now you listen to Jack Nicklaus, I like to know the situation. And Tiger, I like to know the situation. They're the best. For me, I would say I wouldn't pay attention to the board if I'm one of these players trying to get into that group, and say, just don't apply any extra pressure on yourself. Just go out and play. You're in the last group. That's pressure enough. Just play the day and see what happens. That's the way I would look at it. But again,
one of my favorite golf images, of course, is that sort of Munchkin-looking caddy running up to Van de Velde as he was about to tee off with a driver there on 18. He's got, what did he have, like a 3-shot lead? He could have putted the ball the entire time and still come away with the victory. And the guy's screaming at him, no driver. And sure enough, Van de Velde does it, plunks one into I think it was in the rough. Then he's in that, and he's going his pants.
Yep.
Oddly, as much of a choke as that was, he ended up in a 3-man playoff, which he eventually lost also. So losing from an incomparable position would have to, I mean, probably the greatest choke maybe in golf history, and ranks up there with the greatest chokes in sports history. All right, what do we have for tonight, Mike? Mike Jones?
I've been looking at 2 games in baseball. Phil Blackburn going for the Mets. I don't know. The Mets just thought they were riding the ship. Won one of the last 9, I think. I kind of like the Braves tonight with the little pitching edge going into New York. And I'm going to go out west. Walker Buehler going back to LA to go get a ring, I think, or something like that. Maybe the distraction. Angels playing a little bit better ball. Took a hard loss yesterday, 8-7. I kind of like the Red Sox getting away from that Devers atmosphere in San Francisco, coming down into LA. I like the Angels tonight as a small home dog, against the Red Sox.
All right, let's make some money with that. Big Gunner podcast coming up.
Yeah, Big Gunner podcast, a little slow on Giant talk, still going over the schedule. Hearing a lot of good things. Some NFC East people are saying that the Giants could be the team to look out for. The little Fanatics Fan Fest, little story breaking about a fan yelled to Odell Beckham to get back to the Giants. He wasn't ruling that out. Then he started talking about he would rather win a Super Bowl in New York. I think a lot of these players, sometimes when they embrace it, he said, he embraced it, made some comments that were pretty positive about the organization after he left on pretty rough terms. So, just like snooping around Giant lore, just saying again, I go back to this same thing I'll say all the time. For Tyrese Halliburton, for all these players, just stay healthy. When you see a pro athlete, wish them the best of health, not necessarily they have to win. Because that's what these players, it's all about. How long can you stay healthy? Longevity in a career is what makes these players. And I just, hope the Giants can fill the same void with now no injuries, because we've been the most injured team in the past decade. So if we can stay healthy, we'll be competitive.
Fits the cliche that is commonly used now. The most important ability is availability.
That's it.
If you're not in a lineup, you really can't do too much damage. Mike, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for waking up with us on a Monday morning. It's always great getting your perspectives on things. And we'll talk to you again on Thursday on the next visit from you here on Bury Your Bookie. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be with you, Jeff, as always.
All right, Mike Jones, ladies and gentlemen. We'll do it again tomorrow. Hopefully you'll have some scores made with your baseball picks. Mike Jones usually pretty astute on that. And once again, congratulations, Oklahoma City Thunder. Are they a dynasty already? Seems like a premature evaluation, and yet they are poised to be just that. And we'll see what Kevin Durant does with the Houston Rockets after the Miami Heat threw a very, very faint offer, supposedly, at the Phoenix Suns in an attempt to turn their fortunes around because sadly for Pat Riley, who was 80 years old at the helm, like Mike Jones, a huge Pat Riley fan, have been since his early days with the Lakers when I was out in L.A. covering a team. And he was brilliant then, brilliant with the Heat throughout as an executive. Not everybody loves a guy like I do, but wow, you hate to see him snookered like this. And we'll see how impactful that deal is, especially now, what with the East becoming even more wide open than it was before, with Tatum and possibly Halliburton both out for the season for their respective teams. All right, for Mike Jones, I'm Jeff DeForest. We'll catch you next time on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.